scientists from here who used to do DNA extractions in a hotel room because they weren't allowed. They were doing it on whale meat and weren't allowed to send it back to New Zealand because it was prohibited. So they would just do a DNA extraction in their hotel room, send the DNA home.
So how we haven't actually started, we're just talking about random things, so don't worry.
Because DNA extraction can be really easy. Pineapple juice, sugar, vodka, sort of easy.
Really? And how can so many things get contaminated?
Or vodka.
I know, I use saliva. Wait, I don't think that's such a good method.
I had a PhD student who ran out I was working with a PhD student who ran out of some of his reagents. So we went down to the tea room and stole all the sugar and came back with it, because that's what he was missing.
Did you get any situations where people lick the spoon and then put it in the sugar? I'm really freaked out about using public sugar. You open the Milo or something and there's stuff sticking together, you're like, no. I'm not ingesting random people's DNA. So promiscuity is out for me, yes. Okay, should I start?
Yep. Okay.
Well, obviously my talk is about, can you guys hear me? If you can't hear me, just move forward, you can. This is about human mating systems, and I'm also talking about other animals just to provide a bit of context. But in all honesty, since I'm an anthropologist, I don't know very much about, pretty much I know about primates and that's about it. So I tried to find some examples that weren't primates, but yeah, I tried my best, so just bear with me. Okay, so what are mating systems? Actually ran into a slight issue with the community on Reddit anthropology, where I discovered that mating systems actually mean something different for social anthropologists, where it refers to marriage customs, and so they were all like, why are you talking about biology? What have other animals got to do with it? And I was like, why wouldn't they? So yeah. So for the purpose of this talk, this is mating systems refer to the structures within a group that are the base unit for sexual reproduction. So there's three types: monogamy, polygamy, and promiscuity. And polygamy is broken down into three others, and we'll talk about those when we get there. And I'm also going to ask the question if mating systems are actually a valid way of looking at reproduction in humans and in other animals, or are they oversimplified, heteronormative, and unrealistic? This little picture, this is a fat-tailed dwarf lemur. This is a monogamous primate. Pretty cute, right? So when we talk about monogamous species, the characteristics they have low sexual dimorphism, so the males and females are approximately the same size. The males have small testes compared to other mating systems. They engage in mate guarding. This is where the males will fight off other males if they try to mate with their pair-bonded female. They have high levels of infant dependency, high levels of paternal investment, so the males invest quite a bit in raising the infant, usually because they need it. Like for these little guys, if the male dies and while the infant is still young, the infant will die as well, even if the mother's still alive, because they really needed to provide enough resources to keep them alive. Monogamous species are also associated with larger brains. This is hypothesized that larger brains are needed in order to maintain a pair bond. This is related to the social brain hypothesis, if anyone's heard of that. So yeah, you have to kind of work together with somebody else, and you also need a good memory for remembering things. And I don't really know why you would need a good memory for remembering what your pair bonded partner and guess what they like. And I remember Nick, our primatology professor, talking about you have to kind of remember what annoys them and what they like so that you can maintain the pair bond. Monogamy is advantage when, or like I said, when they require a lot of parental care, and so that you have a high level of paternal certainty. Oh yeah, there's a high level of paternal certainty, so it's worth the male investing in the young because they're pretty sure it's theirs. Although the old ideas of monogamy are pretty, they're kind of based on Judeo-Christian ideas of what monogamy is, and so when they first started looking at monogamous species like normally birds, because 90% of birds are monogamous, they kind of assume, oh look, they stay together for a breeding season, they just assume that they stay together for their entire lives. But in reality, pair bonding is way more dynamic, and they trade partners, they will like leave and get back together, extra pair copulations, so those affairs are extremely common. But interestingly, like, paternal certainty is still quite high, so the female will mate quite often with other males, but her offspring are usually, like in the vast majority of cases, her pair bonded male's offspring. So I have, like, I don't know why, but I have a few ideas if anyone wants to talk about that later. So here's some monogamous species. That little guy there is a little baby gibbon. Gibbons are like traditionally monogamous, and we're seen as like one of the big monogamous primates, but they actually engage in extra pair copulations quite often. Sometimes in front of the male, and sometimes he fights the other male off, and sometimes he doesn't, which is quite interesting. Of course, those are the Adelie penguins, which is a favourite of everyone everywhere because they're the monogamous penguins that everyone loves to talk about. But of course, in reality, they are quite often homosexual and form homosexual bonds. So. And there's even a species of monogamous parasitic worm that lives in the human gut. So terribly romantic. And the New Zealand tuatara is apparently monogamous, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so polygyny. This is the most common system that you see in vertebrates. And this, of course, is gorilla, who have a sex ratio of about 5 to 1, 5 female gorillas to 1 male gorilla, who the silverback mates with all the females in the group. When you talk about polygynous species, normally the females are related to each other, so there's quite a big deal of kin selection that goes on. So the females look after, they join forces in looking after the offspring. Well, the male usually doesn't do anything, but the females work together, and they're usually related, so there's an element of kin selection there. In polygynous species, there's usually strong sexual dimorphism. The males are usually much larger than the females, and this is normally attributed to male-male competition, where they have to compete with the females. And they also have relatively small testes, because even once they've won the females, they don't have to compete with them by mating, so they, like, compared to a promiscuous species where they have sperm competition because they have to, like, mate really often to keep up with the other males, but because all the females are like theirs, they don't have to mate as often. Yeah, and of course, like I said, the sex ratio is normally the females vastly outnumber the males, so polygyny kind of makes sense in that situation. And here's some polygynous species. Of course, I chose quite common-looking species, but they're pretty much anything you come across is probably going to be polygynous, including the lovely lions and cattle, of course, because if you've ever been on a farm and you've got one bull and hundreds of cows, or 2 bulls in case the other bull breaks. And this is a prairie chicken, and this little guy has some kind of baboon that's name I've forgotten. A Hamadryas baboon. Alright. Polyandry, this is my favourite. This is a naked mole rat. Do we have any Kim Possible fans? No? No one recognises Rufus? Okay. Yeah, naked mole rats are like pretty much the only eusocial mammalian species. So they have one female who's the queen, and she mates with a bunch of males with her males, and then all the rest are sterile workers who serve her. That's pretty exciting. Polyandry is usually associated with a high cost of living. So that is that the population density is really high and the amount of resources is really small. So the cost for a female to breed is really high. So she needs more than one male to contribute in order for her to get enough resources to reproduce. So that's usually what happens with polyandry. And also, the offspring require like really intense paternal investment, like more than monogamy, so you need extra males. And it's also usually fraternal polyandry, so that means that all the males are related to each other, so a female will mate with a bunch of brothers, so once again there's kin selection there, so they're investing in in offspring that are related to them. And we also see reverse sexual dimorphism, which I thought was kind of a funny term, because it's like the assumption is that with the sexual dimorphism that the males will be bigger, and then the reverse is that females are smaller, females are bigger. So yeah, so like the naked mole rat, the female was much larger than the males who all placed there. So like there's also I also got paternal confusion with a question mark, because paternal confusion is an anti-infanticide strategy where if you mate with lots of males, then they aren't supposed to kill your offspring because it might be theirs. So that's that. I don't think, although that might be a reason for like mating with multiple males, I don't think that it's a reason behind polyandry because of all those other things I was talking about with the high cost of living and the paternal investment. Because if you aren't sure that you're related, then there's no point in investing that much into the offspring. And here's some polyandry species. This is up there is a marmoset of the hang on, I have to look up what it's called. The Goldie marmoset. Yeah, the Goldie marmoset like has more than one birth per season, which is pretty good for a primate. And each egg is fertilized by a different male, so she's got lots of male consorts, but they all get to breed with her because they all get to take turns, so that's pretty fun. In this situation, the males that are her consorts aren't always related. Normally it's fraternal polyandry, but in this case they're not, so it's pretty interesting. And the females actually prefer males who are willing to cooperate, so there's some sexual selection going on there. And down the bottom there is a pipefish, and the pipefish, they actually look after the offspring themselves, like seahorses. So yeah, the males do. So that's why that is an explanation for polyandry there, that the males are the ones looking after them, so they work together. And this is a Galapagos hawk, where they need several males to defend one nest because the predation is so high. So that's why they have multiple males in that situation. Okay, Polygynandry. This is a picture of everyone's favourite primate, the bonobos. Yeah. The problem with using bonobos as an example of this is that they use sex as a form of social bonding, so it's really difficult to tell if that's their mating system or if they're just doing it as part of their culture. Polygynandry is when you have multiple males and multiple females that form a unit together. So it's usually at least two males, at least two females, but it's not, the females normally outnumber the males, and they all contribute to the care of the offspring. And compared to promiscuity, they do have reduced sexual dimorphism. And I don't know about testes size because none of the stuff I read about testes actually talked about polygynandry testicles. So sorry, everyone likes to know about the testes. So and here's some polygynandrous species. This is a type of ground squirrel, the round-tailed ground squirrel. And there's a group of them there, all working together. And that is a tent building bat and a sea spider. And this frog, whose name I can't actually remember, I'm very sorry, has the unusual feature of having extremely high levels of paternal care and extremely high levels of male competition at the same time. So there's no element of female choice involved because the males fight it out, and then the remaining male has to and the remaining males have to invest heaps of energy in the females that are left. So it kind of goes against the normal frog behaviour. And there's one left, which is promiscuity, which is supposedly where any female mates with any male. But honestly, I think that description actually is wrong, and I can't seriously believe that in a species like chimpanzees that it's really random mating, and that I do think that selection actually does occur. In promiscuous species like chimpanzees, where the characteristics are normally that they have a moderate level of sexual dimorphism, huge testy size, large ejaculate, because they have to like compete with males by mating with as many females as possible. And so you see things like sperm competition, which is where like your sperm can like kill other male sperm and things like that. In chimpanzees, they have like hierarchies as well. So the higher ranked males tend to like mate more often than the lower ranked males. And so I don't really think that promiscuity is really the word that they really want to be using. And I think that the whole idea of it is it's way more complicated than just random mating. And it's more that we don't see the patterns there because we're not observing them long enough maybe to see what the patterns are, and so we just assume that it's promiscuous. So here's some supposedly promiscuous species, including bears and fruit-eating bats. And then there's a lesser bird of paradise. I don't know what makes it lesser, but that's apparently what it's called. So, now we're the question, of course, which system do humans use? So, does anyone want to take a vote? Okay, that's what we're going to do. Alright, who thinks that humans are monogamous? Nobody was there. Who thinks humans are polygynous? No one?
Yeah.
You do. No, you don't. Polyandrous? Polygynandry, that's the multi-male female. And promiscuous. Since the guy is engaged, come on.
I'm betting on some sort of hierarchy structure.
And the people who don't think any of those, what do you think?
I think maybe.
You think monogamous maybe? Mainly.
Does he appears
Alright, well, the characteristics of human is that we have extremely highly dependent offspring, like more than any other species in the world. Our testes size is kind of in between, so it's not obviously promiscuous, not obviously monogamous. We have extremely large ejaculate volumes. We have like a pretty much 1-to-1 sex ratio. It's not exactly 1-to-1 because it depends on where you look at it in terms of age, because there tends to be more males born than females, but males have higher mortality, and then women live longer, so it depends on where you look. But around breeding age, it's pretty much 1-to-1, which kind of indicates monogamy. The sexual dimorphism, so I'd just like to skip through the next slide so we can have a look at it. So this is testes size, and it's really difficult. I don't have a laser pointer, so I can't point out where humans are, but it's the number 8 at the top there. And as you can see, it's kind of, it's like it fits the line, but it doesn't fit the clusters of the different mating systems, which all kind of cluster as well as statistics. This is pretty good considering. Is that like humans don't really fit in anywhere, so it's kind of confusing. And when we look at sexual dimorphism, this is the polygynous gorillas up there, so they're like 1.5 to 2 times the size of the females, the male, and the monogamous gibbons, which you basically can't tell the difference, and the promiscuous chimpanzees, who there's a slight difference, but it's not that strong. And then there's humans, but I'm so like used to looking at humans, I couldn't actually tell if there's like a level of sexual dimorphism there, because it's really hard to look at humans objectively. So I don't know. Like, who thinks that there's strong sexual dimorphism between male and female? I don't.
If you look at other characteristics, there's not, like in terms of the canine size and things like that. I mean, most of those other aspects seem to be pretty similar.
I mean, females who have exaggerated secondary sexual characteristics, but not. But that's probably because we have hidden estrus as well, and you kind of there's no indicator. Yeah.
There's certainly strength differences between males and females.
Yeah, but would you say that those differences, like, obviously within humans, it's quite easy to like recognize those differences. But if we were comparing them to differences between gorillas, male and female gorillas, if the differences in those strengths, it would be negligible. So, like, are we seeing a significant difference? I don't know. Humans are confusing. That's why I take anthropology. Alright, I just go back. Oh. Of course, humans have the largest brain size by mass for any other species, which kind of once again indicates monogamy. And we also have hidden estrus, or do we? Because of course there's lots of claims that males can smell out an ovulating female, but yeah. We also have frequent copulation apparently, compared to other primates, and that may come as a surprise to some people. And when we look at cross-cultural examples, we'll find there's definitely no universal system. So, like, we take all of these characteristics together and we come up with the conclusion of, I don't know. And when you look at the literature, they don't know either. Like, there's people who argue for polygyny, people who argue for monogamy, people who argue for some kind of in-between state, promiscuity, pretty much everything, well, except polyandry. Nobody thinks that polyandry is normal. But it is really rare, to be fair. Alright, so we're past these ones. And we'll talk about some of the cross-cultural examples that I mentioned. And for monogamous humans, we have modern Christianity as an example. And apparently, ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. The advantages of monogamy in humans is that you get a high level of paternal certainty, and you get like quite a lot of resources because you've got one person, well, two people, one to look after the offspring and one to contribute resources, so that means that you have an advantage for your offspring. And I threw this one here for Augusta actually. That it may give you an advantage because if you've got a male contributing, then you may be allowed to reduce the time that you wean, the weaning time, which means that you can increase your interbirth interval, I'll try and explain it more simply, that if you wean your child faster, then you can have your next child in a quicker amount of time, and humans have like a really small interbirth interval compared to other primates. So yeah, that could be due to paternal investment or other parenting, that's what I would say. Polygynous humans, as seen in the Abrahamic traditions in the Old Testament and Quran and so on, including Mormonism, as I was told by Richard yesterday, that apparently Mormonism started just after the Civil War when there was a lack of males. So yeah, maybe it was actually an advantage at the time for it to be polygynous, and now it's kind of an environmental mismatch maybe. In polygynous humans, the males have to be able to afford to have lots of wives, which usually excludes the younger males because the older males have had more time to accumulate resources. This also means that the younger males have to be driven away, which is what, of course, we see in Mormon communities, where the younger males are like kind of kicked out because they have an advantage that they can offer younger girls to be their first wife, but they don't have as much resources, so they do get driven away. We tend to see polygynous societies where there's a high level of male mortality, so like I said, just after a war or something like that. So in some cases, I would say that polygyny is actually an advantage. And some polyandrous humans, these are this is really rare, and in almost every case, it's fraternal polyandry, so the males are usually like brothers. And this is, of course, the classic example of the Tibetan farmers, as Blair was talking about before, where they hold a piece of land, but it's inherited through the male line, but if they split it up, then the land becomes useless because they've got so many people living there and so little land that if they split it up anymore, they wouldn't be able to grow enough. So they marry the same woman and they live in there, so they don't split up the land. So that's the advantage there. And this is also similar to what we see in the Todas and the Biharis societies in India, which actually aren't allowed to have polyandrous relationships anymore. And also in Tibet, China doesn't like it either, so it's getting wiped out. And this picture is it's from the Hindu epic where Mahabharata, she was the daughter of the king. She married 5 brothers, and so that's her picture there. So historically, it was pretty normal. Well, normal. Polygynandrous humans, and apart from what we would consider the modern polyamory, that this is a kind of a modern thing. And if you spend a lot of time on skeptical blogs like I do, it seems to be the new thing that everybody loves. And historically, there wasn't that many cases of it, although it did occur in ancient Hawaii and Melanesia, apparently. And usually the people in the marriage were related to each other, so like brothers and sisters marrying each other in the group. So once again, kin selection. And it's not legal in any country so far. Although I think it's a shame, because out of all of them, I think in modern society this is the most advantageous. And if anyone here has ever tried to pay for a mortgage and have paid for childcare at the same time, you'd be like, wow, I could really use another family income right now. It also allows you to have more peer bonding, more mates without risking STDs and things like that. So you have all the advantages of an increased group in terms of peer bonding, and you don't have the risks associated with promiscuity. I'll just share, I've been reading this book about the psychology of monogamy, and the psychologists describe it as an intolerable state that no human can survive through this. And so you're going like, I don't think you're putting your own like beliefs into that. I don't think it's intolerable. Okay, some promiscuous humans, which I couldn't actually find examples of like in terms of like society, you know, like the other ones. And so I have some pictures here. This is a sex cult where everyone is expected to have sex with each other, and at the top there is the free love ideal from the 60s. But once again, I'm pretty sure that even though they're supposed to be promiscuous, I don't think they really were. I think there was definitely little groups going on and people picking others, and I can assure you that I've been rejected enough times to know that males will not mate with any female that offers an opportunity. Definitely. Yeah, so promiscuity also has like a really negative association, and I think like the whole like system needs to be like revised, and I think it needs a new term, and I think it needs to be checked to make sure that's actually what we think is happening, and there aren't like hierarchies and bargaining going on. Like I know from primates that females like can exchange sex for resources. So like a lower ranked male who normally wouldn't have access to females can, well, they can also be friends with them. It doesn't sound so callous. And so like, yeah, that's right, everybody. If you be friends with somebody, they might have sex with you. It's true. And sometimes they give them stuff like meat, and then the females will mate with them. So it's way more complicated than just the alpha male mates with all the females. So yeah, some of the problems I think with mating systems is that I think monogamy is a misnomer, and not like there's a difference between sexual monogamy and social monogamy. Where social monogamy is what we would call the peer bond, where two individuals will work together, and there's massive advantages of that as well, where you can hold resources and defend them, and you can invest in your offspring. And sexual monogamy is extremely rare and doesn't tend to occur, and this is where you have exclusive mating access to the other person in your peer bond. And yeah, that pretty much never happens. Even in birds tend to mate with other people outside their peer bond. So yeah, monogamy basically doesn't happen. Except in humans, apparently. Although, to be fair, the rate of affairs in human monogamy is actually really high cross-culturally. But once again, it's similar to monogamous animals, like non-human animals, and that the paternal certainty is still high. So women may be cheating on you, but they're not like having some other man's baby. So don't worry about that. Yeah, so bisexuality is extremely common, especially in primates, where even in our standard textbook that we are given, it's like primates are bisexual, full stop. Animals like switch their mating system like during their lifetimes. So I think this is a really important point, in that I think that what might work at a certain part of your life history might then change at a later part. Like if you were raising offspring, it might make sense to be monogamous at that time so that you can both invest in the offspring, and then later on you might switch to something else because, well, you can. And so I think that systems are not black and white. Like these categories are really arbitrary, and like you're kind of trying to cram them in, and they're based on our preconceptions rather than what's actually real. And the way that animals really are is much more dynamic, and it allows us to react to the environment. And so when we talk about all those characteristics of the human mating systems and we compare them back to animal mating systems, we can see that they're quite similar, and that, you know, like the polygynous tends to occur when there's like a lack of males, the polyandrous occurs when there's a high need for resources, monogamy occurs when the paternal investment is needed. So yeah, I think those systems are meant to be, are not a result of evolution in the strictest sense, and that one particular system has been selected for. I think it's more that the flexibility has been selected for. So when it comes to humans, we have to like take into account culture, of course, because culture overrides biology quite often. And so that's when we get cases of people, like, when you think about our culture, how monogamy is taught to us from the very beginning, that you'll find your soulmate and you get married and you live happily ever after. And it's like really hard to tell if we do that because we're socialized into it or because it's a really efficient system. So it's really difficult to tell, and I don't really know a way of how to counter culture when we're looking at these. But I would say that there's no such thing as a natural system for humans, and I would also extend that to say there isn't one for most animals, probably like limited, like animals of limited complexity, but possibly have one system that tends to be selected for. But definitely primates, I don't think there's one system. And but of course, so what? Why do I even care that people are trying to use these systems if they don't ever apply? Well, first of all, because it holds back science, which I think is important. If we're going with preconceptions of what mating systems are going to be like, that's what we see. Like when with the Gibbons, we expected the monogamy, so we go in there and we see, oh yeah, they're forming a pair bond, and then that's what you record, and you didn't like look to see that it was actual like changes, and so it kind of stuffs up our science. So that's one important point. And the other point is, of course, that these ideas about what is natural and traditional are used in society to discriminate against people who don't have those systems. So that's, science does not say that one system is better than another. It's all context dependent. And so when you have people say, well, this traditional marriage is one male and one female, and that's what it should be because that's traditional, or homosexuality is not natural, or whatever. All those things are not supported by science, and science should not be used to justify people's preconceptions. And so this is kind of what biological anthropology can do for society, is have a look at these things and show that these things aren't natural, and it's not biological reasons, they're cultural reasons. So there's no reason why we should be discriminating against people. Alright, this is just the references that I was apparently going to put on there if anyone wants to read them. But it was only 40 minutes, so that's good. So now we have the part where you can ask questions, or make comments, or offer me a polygamous relationship.
There was an interesting paper done in Drosophila in fruit flies, and they showed that males mating with more females could increase their reproductive success almost exponentially, or with the increase in females, whereas females increased slightly and then it plateaued with risk of STDs. And Mark Pulver from I'm not sure if he's still in SBS, but he did the same. He copied the paper, but on celebrities, and looked at the amount of number of marriages and the number of children produced from marriages. And the more marriages a man had, the more children he had. The more marriages a woman had didn't increase the number of children she had. And he used number of children to stand in for reproductive success.
I was so sure someone was going to talk about that I almost made an extra slide for it. But to do with like intersexual composition, where I don't really know like how far the concept goes, but of course the traditional idea is that the male wants to mate with as many females as possible to increase his reproductive success, whereas the female wants to doesn't have can't be risk taking because her eggs are much more precious, and so she has to be much more choosy. And so she wants to keep the males for herself, whereas the males want to like have as many females as possible. But like what I was talking about before in terms of the different like systems and how there's like advantages and disadvantages for all of them. And so like yeah, like fruit flies have an advantage. The males have an advantage if they mate with all these different females, but they don't have a high level of paternal investment. Their offspring don't require like any kind of paternal care, so it's not really applicable to humans. But I see what you're saying, but it's just Drosophila, come on.
Also a funny paper. Rochelle Constantine was going to suggest it for an Ig Nobel, but she never got around to doing it.
Which celebrities were they?
I think
Was the Emmy
Maybe
nominated
100?
actors or something, wasn't it? And actresses?
yeah, actors and actresses. I think another.
What? Emmy winners?
As a
What's
side
the
note,
answer?
I thought that you were supposed to use grandchildren as a more appropriate measure of reproductive success than just offspring.
Probably, yeah.
So maybe a few decades later they could do it and see if it changed in terms of the grandchildren. Like it.
Yeah, because like celebrities are totally a representative sample of humans.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
On that basis, I think Angelina Jolie would like reproductive success at that point would be pretty
Yeah,
high.
but she's been adopting, so that's not her own
Does that count?
success. No.
But then she'll still have grandchildren that would technically be her share.
I think what's the point of measuring it? Come on.
Yeah.
Monogamy, you talked about monogamy and brain size.
Yeah.
Couldn't it also simply be that the ecological conditions that create monogamy or make monogamy more advantageous also contribute to higher brain size, like having to defend a territory or something like that, perhaps?
Possibly. I've only ever looked at it in primates, and this is when I did a paper on the social brain hypothesis. And in primates, the ones that, like, but I also think it ties more to the complexity of the social group, because I don't think it's necessarily monogamy so much as a really complex social relationship. So, because like you don't really, like, even though like cows live in a massive herd and there's heaps of them, they don't tend to have increased brain size. But in primates, you see there's an increase in brain size associated with increase in group size. And so, like, I think monogamy is just like another little thing associated with the increase in group size. So, and to answer your question, possibly it's it's something else. Yeah, I know I didn't really answer related to the question, but. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I have a long list of questions.
You have a whole list of questions.
Can I ask another one?
It might be on the pages of stuff I didn't say.
What about the gorilla sex ratio? Why are there so many, what is it, there's more, like,
5-to-1.
yeah, there's what, 5 females for every male or something like that? I'm pretty sure I had a question related to it. Yeah, well, why is the sex ratio so slanted towards females?
I don't know.
Could it be, well,
I just assumed that it was the other way around, that their mating system was like that because of their sex ratio, not the other way around. So
yeah, I guess I was
I think it's within breeding groups. I think there are actually males that don't have reproductive success, so they don't live in one of these, like, they call them like harem style kind of little reproductive groups, but they never actually get to full sexual maturity.
Yeah.
So they don't actually get the secondary sexual characteristics that are associated with like the silverback males. So I think
that's similar to orangutans.
Yeah, so in the same in orangutans, where they basically have like a big home range of one male, and then there'll be 4 or 5 females within that range. And then the males that don't kind of manage to allocate these females never actually they never get to full sexual maturity. So I think they are there, but they're just kind of like weird wanderers that never really mature.
Although, isn't there like sneakers?
Yeah, they do. They have like forced copulations in some of the orangutan populations.
Yeah, but I mean, like, there are sneakers where there's like males who haven't reached, like I don't remember what it's called in orangs, where they get like the big shaggy pout and stuff. And like, so there's like sexually immature males who are like sneaking and having sex with the females.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and they think that
They got
actually might be
sneakers.
more like that might be more of a byproduct of the like humans' impact on and logging it, because it's been so damaging to orangutan populations. That might be more a side effect.
Really? I thought it was just because strategy, everyone uses a different strategy depending on their individual circumstances. So.
Yeah, it's because there's kind of been this idea that orangutans were really solitary. But
Yeah.
it's looking like that might.
Yeah, because like in the Auckland Zoo, they live in a group quite happily, and
Yeah.
the experiments show that how big a group size is in two can live together is dependent on the resources. So if there's enough resources, they'll live there quite happily. So yeah, so
Like in the
what
last
we
project
see
was
is
that-
solitary might be just because of the environment as it is today. I don't know what it was like. Oh, primatology nerdery.
Do you know if there is a like a male skewed sex ratio with polyandry, or whether there's just lots of
You're wondering what happens to the extra females. Like in terms of human populations, because I actually checked it, they just leave. Because like for instance in the Tibetan area where so the females don't get married because they marry a group of others, they just move to a different part of the country and marry other people there. Because there's conveniently located polygynous societies in India nearby, so just go somewhere else. Well, like with the naked mole rats, she's got like control. They're sterile anyway, so that's control of the extra female. So that explains that. And so it's really only in like really complicated mammals like primates that you have to question why there's a skewed sex ratio. But I just assumed that it was just natural. Let me check.
There's an interesting, I think it's African tribe, where a male might have 2, 3, 4 wives, but males steal each other's wives, and they'll have sort of meetings of tribes where they sort of socialise, and different males will hit on other males' wives and come back in the night and steal them. And it seems to be like a sort of common thing that happens. But if you get caught, you get the crap beat out of you or you get killed. But it happens, your wife gets stolen and, oh well.
Okay, this stuff that you're talking about is like more of a social anthropologist kind of thing, because like humans do weird stuff and I don't know how to explain it. Maybe inbreeding avoidance, but I don't want to reach and assume there's a biological explanation for a cultural thing, otherwise I'll get beaten to death by social anthropologists with their ethnographies. No, not the Trobriand one. The Trobriand Islands, there's a lot of ethnographies and they're very long.
Is it like a dominance hierarchy normal in polygamy, like preferred males or preferred females, or
In humans or in non-human animals?
either or?
I would say at a guess, yes, there would definitely be preferences, but I'm not. I think that you'd have to like look at the individual groups in order to answer that question, because otherwise it's just a guess. But if in humans, I would say if you were married to a group, I think there'd be like little things going on where you have one that you like more than the other, and there'd be like fighting and stuff.
I think in the UAE, I know that when I had like friends whose dads had multiple wives, the first one was usually the boss,
Yeah.
like kind of the head wife.
Yeah.
Unless if they had married an outside birth and then they married an Emirati, then the Emirati would kind of take precedence. But I know that in some part depends on if all of the females that are left behind, if they're related or not, then that will make a bit of a difference.
Yeah, because the females themselves will form alliances.
Yeah, so they'll tend to like preferentially kind of like look after their kin, and so then they can all get kind of higher status.
Yeah.
And so then those who don't have like high ranking kin or anything will be down the bottom, and then they're like, I have to at least preferred and don't get as much resources and I don't do as much sex.
I'd also be suspicious that there'd be like extramarital affairs going on in there as well, especially in polyandry. I bet that the males, the extra males, are going out and getting something on the side. I mean, it sounds really bad, but it just kind of makes sense.
What about?
Did you take notes?
No, I just wrote down a few questions. That's actually the last question I've got written down. Like, do you think maybe, say, at the individual level, maybe one system is like a different system is favoured compared to, say, at a group level? Like maybe at a group level, perhaps monogamy is more preferable because it sort of lessens the competition and things like that.
I would actually say it's the other way around, in that at the individual level is where the advantages happen, because if an entire group is like has one system, then they'll, like if you choose a different system, then you have an advantage. So like if everybody's promiscuous and you choose to be monogamous, then you get advantages in terms of increased parental investment. So what I would really see in a group is a range of different strategies being used, and it would depend on the individual circumstances, because don't forget that when it comes to reproduction, it's an interaction between you and the person that you're trying to mate with, and so you have to like attract them and they have to be attracted to you, and so there's limitations on that. So like you could want to be in a polygynous relationship, but you are not that attractive, so you have to like settle for monogamy. So it would depend on the individual circumstances, and there's other things as well, like even where you live, because if you live in an area where there's not a lot, like if you're a farmer in the, like a Otago region or something, and there's no woman around, and you're probably not going to get in a polygynous relationship. I mean, it's pushing that quite a bit. So, and also if you're not rich enough to support that many wives, then that's another factor as well. So at the individual level is where I think that the selection of, the choice is made, if it's indeed a choice, rather than at the group level. At the group level, I'd expect to see a whole different range, and that no strategy would be significantly more, maybe some strategies would be more advantageous over others, but I think it's like really at the individual level where it really counts.
But don't groups have rules that are enforced on individuals? Like, I mean, even in our society, monogamy is fairly expected, if not enforced.
Yeah, that's where the whole culture comes in and like breaks everything up. Because it kind of like overrides everything, and so it's really difficult to know what would be advantageous or what would be best for an individual, because you're socialised into thinking a certain way. So, like, even I am, so of course I am. But I wouldn't say that you could. I don't even know what I was going to say now because I forgot. I would say that the cultural imperatives that are forced upon us, like, have such an effect that you don't even, like, the advantages of certain systems wouldn't even come into question, because we're just forced into a certain way of thinking. There's no group selection because it's overridden is what I would say. You don't know what I'm talking about, do you? Okay, there might be one system that is advantageous over others, but we wouldn't know it because we've been socialised into thinking that one system is preferable to the other.
Like polygamy might be advantageous, but you couldn't do it, partly because it's illegal.
Yeah.
And frowned upon.
I have
could be, but you can't tell within the whole culture thing. That's why you look at non-human animals and see the patterns that they have, and then you wildly speculate about whether that applies to humans.
But it does seem to create, like, say if you compared monogamy with the polygamous systems, it does seem to be less conflict because each person just has their partner, and well, ideally that's it, and there's no extra populations and such. Whereas if you have a polygamous system, there's going to be people who don't have anyone, and they're going to, you know, probably not be happy with that situation.
There's people right now who don't have anyone.
Yeah, that's going to be more.
Are you talking about the sex balance ratio?
No, not the sex ratio. Just that.
No, she said sex balance ratio.
No, but balance. So,
okay.
Like, do you mean that there would be too many, if like we lived in a society where like there was one male and multiple females, then what would happen to all the other males?
Yeah. Or likewise, if it was one female and lots of males, there would be more jealousy.
Well, yeah, that's why, like, when you look at which mating system, you look at the sex ratio. But that doesn't mean that you can rule out Polygynandry, because you can have even numbers of males and females in a group.
Yes, but there could still be more competition if there was a hierarchy within that.
Then there's like the issue of jealousy, and whether, you know, jealousy is an actual thing, or if it's just something we're socialised into having, which I don't actually know. So there could be a situation where you're in a multiple, like in a group marriage, and you get jealous, but you know, I wouldn't recommend being in a group marriage if that's not how you feel. But do we get jealous because we're expected that we only have one person to love us forever and ever, or do we get jealous because there's an evolutionary reason for it? I don't know. Probably both.
Is there any data or any papers done on sort of pre-agricultural humans or pre-Homo sapien populations?
Yes, that's one of the things I didn't talk about.
Awesome.
Okay, well, they looked at Australopithecines and their sexual dimorphism, and because obviously they don't have testing size or, you know, behavioural studies or anything, and they noticed a trend that there, like at first there was, you know, sexual dimorphism between male and female, and then it kind of decreased over time, which they like suppose was like a trend towards monogamy. So that kind of implies that, and which started around Homo erectus, which kind of implies that Homo sapiens are like sort of in between, like we're trending towards monogamy from polygyny, but you know, those studies are extremely controversial because they're like based on like Australopithecine bones and like kind of guide of, oh, is that really sexual dimorphic? And then like on top of that, you're like saying that sexual dimorphism is a key characteristic that can indicate which mating system. But as we've talked about, mating systems are much more complex and dynamic than just what size people are, and so basically we have no idea, but lots of people try and argue that humans used to be polygynous or are polygynous or are monogamous, or yeah. So.
And this is only on a handful of fossils in some cases, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. We don't have that many. Come on. We try finding human ancestors in the savannah. Come on.
What about Neanderthals?
The one paper I read was pretty darn convinced that Neanderthals were polygynous, but once again, it's based on the same idea, because they don't. Like, the thing is that what I was talking about is that you look at all of these characteristics and then you like put them in the category of, oh, they're this mating system, but then they don't follow that. Like even animals like change halfway through and they react to changes in the environment by switching to a different one. And so like trying to apply that to humans and human ancestors when it doesn't even apply to animals, like non-human animals, I think is a bit spurious. It's just based on sexual dimorphism and fossils. Yeah. I think a lot of people want to try and make a definite answer about something, when I think in biology there's no definite answer, and things are way more flexible and react to the environment in a much more dynamic way.
So, do you agree that, how do I put it, males are, in humans this time, males are more willing to have sex with, say, some random female than females are?
We've already talked about this, but you just want me to say it because I don't think it's fair. Yes, I do think males are more likely to want to have sex with random females than females, and they don't want to have sex with random males. Okay?
Yeah.
Their eggs are more precious, they have to be a bit more picky, okay?
So do you think that's a biological basis as opposed to purely a cultural basis?
Yes, I know it's really terrible of me to say, and feminists will get angry at me. I do think that there is a massive cultural thing where women are expected to like not be slutty and it's okay for men to be studs. Yes, I'm not saying it doesn't occur. That's totally true. But yeah, I do think there is a biological reason as well.
Yeah.
Why don't you try to convince the feminists of that?
Well, it depends on what kind of feminist that you're talking to.
Because it seems logical.
I don't know whether you say the feminists.
Just that group.
The feminists. It's like the gays.
The gays and the gay agenda. Destroy the American family, molest children, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Then those gays, or the gay, whatever. I can't even do it right.
What would the feminist agenda be?
Equality?
Most feminists.
Everyone stop talking now, and it's just past 6 o'clock. Unless somebody else has something they want to talk about, you can share your anecdotes of your coincidence relationships or something.
I don't have one question. Where does homosexuality fit in? Does it fit in?
Yeah. Well, when you talk about, well, especially if it's in, if you're talking about monogamy, because like I was saying, that peer bonds, like social monogamy is completely different from sexual monogamy. So when you talk about sexual monogamy being exclusive mating access, and you talk about social monogamy being two individuals who are grouping together in order to hold resources, raise offspring, it doesn't matter what sex those individuals are. And so we see peer bonding occur in the animal kingdom and of course in humans as well. And so if you're like extending that to the other systems, I don't see any reason whatsoever why it would make a difference what the sex is of, like in a polygynandrous relationship. It doesn't matter who's having sex with who. What matters is that people are working together. So yeah, it's all about peer bonding.
So could the sort of the whakawhinis be more of a biological mating system than a cultural thing? Because I mean, kin selection and resource gathering and division of labour and that sort of thing.
Okay, so like, if we're talking about like intersex and intergendered people, I think that's kind of like outside the scope of mating systems. It's kind of a really different issue. Especially like whakawhine, which is like extremely cultural as well as, you know, because I would say there's definitely a biological reason behind people being like intersex and being transgendered. So, but like yeah, so there's too much going on there, too much for the scope of this. Come on. Are there intersex non-human animals? Yes, there are.
Seems like homosexuality could come about so that there's like so less children being made.
No.
Really? No,
Because why would natural selection select like it
no,
doesn't?
so it's more resources for each family.
But then like it works at the individual level. So like someone sacrificing themselves so that another person has more successful breeding. It's not going to happen. That's not how natural selection is going to work. But like when you think about homosexuality,
but it might be like some tribes against tribes.
You mean kin selection?
Yes,
Yeah.
kin selection.